First off, it's nice to be in my hometown. It's nice to be in my hometown. It's nice to be with my sheriff. Sheriff Ramboss has done a great job keeping this community safe and works every day to keep the community safe. And knock on wood, we'll continue to have a very low crime county, and actually we have a low crime state. I've got an important announcement today on something I'm going to work hard on to get passed in the U.S. Senate and in the House. I want to recognize a few of the individuals with me first. Of course, Sheriff Ramboss, I think everybody around here knows. Next, we got Tom and Gina Hoyer. We had the opportunity to get together. Unfortunately, had a very bad experience. They lost their son in the Parkland school shooting. The positive about the Hoyers is they've stayed active to try to make sure that it never happens again. So I want to thank them for that. I want to thank Bridget Ziegler for being here. Bridget she started a group called Moms for Liberty, but she's also on the school board of the Sarasota County School Board, and I had the opportunity to point her back a long time ago. And when I was governor, she's done a great job working on making sure our kids learn the right things, but also they're safe. I think every parent expects their child to come home alive, safe, and healthy. Next, I want to recognize Ryan Petty. Ryan also lost a child, a daughter, at Parkland. We actually had met before that. He and his son had come down after Hurricane Irma and did hurricane relief in the Everglades City area. But he's, like the Hoyers, has stayed active, and they're part of a group called Stand for Parkland. But they've also, there's 7 or 8 families from the Parkland that are all involved in Stand for Parkland, but they also trying to do things to make sure this never happens to anybody else's family. So you have to admire people that do this after a horrible tragedy for their family, which I don't think any of us can imagine happening. We have, Ann and I have grown daughters, and we have 7 grandchildren. And the one thing I talk to them all the time, my daughters, is how are they making sure their schools that their children go to are safe. And I hope every parent wakes up every day and says, okay, so is my school doing the right thing? Because there's a greater chance your school will do the right thing if you make sure you're part of making sure there's a solution there. Make sure that law enforcement is there. Make sure that there's few entrances. Make sure that there's every security. Make sure that the teachers and the students know what to do if there's an active shooter, because all those things are going to save lives. We're here today to talk about new legislation that I'm proposing. It's called the School Guardian Act, which we'll be fighting. I'm going to be fighting the Senate, and then we'll get it through the Senate, work to get it through the House, and get it to President Biden's desk to get it signed. It's going to save lives, and that's why I'm doing it. You all know that after Parkland happened 5 years ago, we put together 3 teams within a couple days: mental health counselors, educators, and law enforcement, to come up with historic legislation. And the legislature worked on it with us, all of us. We all did it together. The parents that lost their loved ones at Parkland were part of this, and we got historic school legislation done. None of us want anything like this to happen again anywhere in this country, for sure in our hometown. We knew we had to do something significant. We had to make significant change if we want a different result, and that's what we did in Florida. As a result of these working groups was that we passed the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School Public Safety Act, which, among things, we made sure that in every public school in Florida there was going to be a law enforcement officer. It's too bad we have to do this. It's too bad we have to think about this, but we do. And the sheriff can tell you stories about how he's helped prevent school shootings because of the legislation we've passed. But there will be an armed police officer, a sheriff's deputy, or an individual who has completed the rigorous training produced through the Guardian program at all these schools. These brave public servants are in our schools to keep our kids and teachers safe. Everybody in that school ought to be safe. And when you hear about a school shooting around the country, and you see how people acted, it's remarkable. The law enforcement goes in, but also the people at the school that keep these kids safe. But we also know it's not just public schools that are at risk. We just saw this in the shooting in Nashville the other day, and your heart goes out to those. And there, I actually lived close to where that school was at one time. Also, when I was governor, our Jewish schools were getting threats. So our Jewish day schools were getting threats. So I worked with the legislature, and we put up historic legislation and funding to help get our Jewish schools safe. But the truth is, every school is going to need law enforcement. We've got to make sure all schools are safe. Protecting our kids, it should be partisan. Republican, Democrat, Independent, every kid ought to be protected. Every parent ought to know that their kid's safe. I don't think we should do anything to have a partisan fight over this. What we did in our legislation in Florida, Republicans and Democrats came together to pass that. It wasn't partisan at all. This is about, of course, saving lives. I'm announcing new legislation, and it's going to put a law enforcement in every school, every single school across the country. It's common sense. It's going to save lives. Now, this is historic legislation, and the way we're going to get the funding for this is the IRS money, the money that was put in, $70 billion for IRS agents. We don't need them. Look around the country. We don't need those IRS agents. What we need is more law enforcement agents. We need more law enforcement across the country. So I'm proud that Stand with Parkland, the parents from Parkland support this. I'm also proud that the Florida Sheriff's Association supports this and the Florida Police Chiefs Association. I'm going to work across the aisle with Republicans, with Democrats and Republicans, and in the House to get this passed. So with this, I want to recognize next Sheriff Rambos to talk about the importance of this type of legislation and the importance of having law enforcement in the schools.
Thank you, Senator Scott. Thank you for being here this morning and introducing this type of legislation for school safety. Most importantly, I'd like to recognize and extend my condolences to our guests from Parkland that are with us here today, and all families who have lost lives to school shooting. This is a senseless and unimaginable loss that no one should experience. I can tell you, as a sheriff of Collier County, and all my fellow sheriffs have made a commitment to make school safety our priorities. And school safety has many layers, but the top of that layer is law enforcement officers that are trained and equipped and on school campuses each and every day. That's why this legislation is so tremendously important and a benefit to those communities throughout our state and our nation who may not have the resources to accomplish it without financial assistance. Because when it comes to school safety, there's no substitute for having a law enforcement officer on a school campus, armed, trained, and committed to stop a threat. Thank you very much, Senator.
Thank you, Sheriff. Now we're going to hear from Tom and Gina Hoyer, who unfortunately lost their son at Parkland. But what I admire about them is they didn't take that tragedy and just curl up in a ball, though I'm sure they felt like that. They went and tried to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Tom Hoyer. This is my wife, Gina. We are members of a group called Stand with Parkland, which was established in the wake of the shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in 2018. And we at Stand with Parkland are proud and honored to endorse Senator Rick Scott's School Guardian Act. The tragic shooting in Parkland urged us to work closely with then Governor Rick Scott to implement effective measures here in Florida to protect students and teachers in schools. And we continue now to do that on a national level. No family should endure the heartbreak that we still go through to this day. So it's essential that when students and teachers go to school, that they know their safety is a top priority and that they are being protected. And this bill will make that a reality across America. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom and Gina. Next, we're going to hear from Ryan Petty, who unfortunately lost his daughter. I can't imagine. I think about this because I have 6 grandsons and a granddaughter. I just can't imagine what these parents go through each and every day. Ryan Petty.
Thank you, Senator. I want to just take this opportunity to say a couple of brief things. One is I'm grateful for the friendship that I have with Senator Scott and the work that he did while he was governor here in the state of Florida. We have fundamentally changed our posture around protecting our kids at school in our schools in Florida, and that all started because of his leadership and his work in bringing folks together. So, Senator, thank you. Again, this bill is incredibly important. You know, I was just talking with the sheriff before we came in, and I'm so impressed with what this sheriff and this sheriff's office is doing to prevent school attacks. But if we can't prevent them, then we know having an armed response on campus is the fastest way to stop the killing, to stop these attacks from happening. So I am proud to stand here and support this legislation. This is what's needed in every one of our schools. We need to be able to protect our kids. Nothing we teach them in that classroom matters if they don't make it home. Thank you.
Next, we're going to hear from Bridget Ziegler.
Thank you, and thank you to Senator Scott for his leadership. As a school board member, when the tragedy at Parkland happened in Sarasota County, I was tasked with every other school board across the state to quickly answer those questions on what to do. I've had the honor to know Ryan Petty and many of the other Parkland families who took a tragedy like that to deploy action and focus, and I thank you guys for that. You know, it is, as a mother of 3 young children, it's a tragedy to think about every day when you kiss your child to school, go to school, that there is this element in your mind thinking about them, but they may not come back. So again, with Senator Scott's leadership, I do believe every single school across this country should have the resources and support to protect our children, engage our families so that they know what's happening in their schools. As Senator Scott said before, that plays a pivotal role. So I encourage families to get involved and understand so that see how they can help. All of these things are deterrence and involvement to keep our children safe. And there is no more important asset and treasure in this country than our future of our children. Thank you.
You know what? I think everybody up here either responded to what happened after Parkland, or unfortunately were directly impacted because of their family. But the legislation we passed actually is very historic legislation that you know, if we can figure out how to do this around the country, and part of it is a law enforcement. That's what this bill will do around, you know, all of our schools around the country. But we all have to be very active. And as Ryan Petty said, is we've got to figure out how to make sure this doesn't happen in the first place. And then we got to make sure we do what the sheriff and our sheriffs have done and police chiefs have done, is make sure that the law enforcement is at our schools is clearly trained to be able to respond. And when they do, as you can see in what happened in Nashville, they do the right thing. So we can answer any questions anybody has.
How many school districts, you know, in the state or areas are lacking law enforcement in schools that you were mentioning?
Say it again, please.
How many school districts, you know, across the state are lacking law enforcement that need, you know, this type of funding?
In Florida, every school district should have the resources. Here's when and Sheriff, you might want to talk about this a little bit, but when we passed the legislation after the Parkland shooting, some schools already had law enforcement, and some of that was being funded by the school districts, and some of that was being funded by the sheriff's department. I think even some was by the police departments. So what we did is we put up the resources to make sure every school had the resources. So today in Florida, every school has the funding and should have a law enforcement officer there. I don't know if you want to talk about this county in particular.
Yeah, and the senator is absolutely correct because he implemented it. So the rest of us in the state made sure that we had the proper staffing involved. There's an option for a guardian element for a community that may not have it, but one way or the other, there is a gun-carrying law enforcement officer or law enforcement trained person in the state of Florida. But other communities throughout the nation do not have the resources that our governor and our state gave us, and this will help to change that.
Ryan, do you want to talk about how you're on the board? Ryan's on the board of education for the state. Do you want to talk about how you made sure it was implemented? Sure. Because you guys went through the process to make sure the law was implemented.
We did, yeah. So we've had, I have the opportunity to sit on the State Board of Education, and I've taken particular interest in the Office of Safe Schools that was created because of the legislation that then Governor Scott put forward. we now have, as the sheriff has said and as the senator said, there is an armed individual on every campus in every public school in the state of Florida. And that law enforcement officer or that guardian is there for the purpose of protecting the kids in that school and the staff in that school. What we do at the State Board of Education is through a process of reporting. Each district then reports into the State Department of Education and lets us know what's going on in their individual schools. We know that we have, they report in on the fact that there is armed security present on the campus, and also they report in through a process called CESR that Bridget will be familiar with, report in on the number of incidents of violence and discipline that go on in each of our schools. So we have, and that's done on a monthly basis now. That's brand new. It used to be done at the end of the school year. It's now done on a monthly basis. So we have an opportunity to see problems as they're developing and take action within the school year to protect our students in our schools.
Bridget, do you want to talk about how you implemented it?
Yeah. So when we passed the legislation in the state of Florida, I think it's important to understand we have 67 counties, which equates to each school district, all very vastly different. And so what it allowed for and ensured that every single public school, including charter schools, had an armed officer of some sort in their school as a deterrent, as we've said. Each school district's different. Sarasota County actually had partners with their sheriff office prior to that, but at that time created their own individual police department. Many other districts, large districts, including Brevard, I believe, also did the Guardian program. So it really just depended on that partnership with the sheriff's office and their local municipalities. But at the end of the day, it does make a pivotal aspect of that, the fact that you have an armed law enforcement officer there. When everyone in that community knows this, we know that's a huge deterrent, but it also builds up the community as far as their partnership with law enforcement. And again, it's working through not one isolated issue or one isolated organization can help it. It all is a community. The mental health component, the law enforcement component, and the community and parent component all play a pivotal role in order our children stay safe.
Senator, may I? Sure. I think it's important to recognize, and I think I should say this, I think we all think it, throughout the United States, every law enforcement agency that has a school in their jurisdiction is coming across comments, behaviors, or direct threats that are being made that have got to be investigated, they've got to be intervened and stopped and or responded to. So what the senator is proposing and what all of these individuals up here are looking for is to ensure that law enforcement has what it needs to respond to those types of incidents. And as was mentioned, prevention is really going to be where we would like to always be, but I can tell you that we are trained to stop the threat as well.
What else? Yes.
Can you speak a little bit about the Guardian program in Collier County schools? How many guardians you have participating in it, and what's been like the positive impacts you guys have seen?
At this point, the school board has not chosen to put the Guardian program in place. I can tell you that we have since the beginning, put a sworn law enforcement officer in, which, if I have my choice, that's who I would prefer to see at that location. But if the school board were to change its mind, we have in place the training curriculum, and we will be able to train and implement should they decide to do that.
Yes, sir.
Senator, we've seen things up in Lee County, like the possibility of metal detectors and other portions of prevention. Are those things that you guys are looking at in terms of this bill as well?
This is for law enforcement. So what was happening in the state before? The state had allocated a certain amount of money for hardening the schools and adding things like that. What we did in the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas bill is we put additional resources in to be used for things like metal detectors, one entrance, better windows, all those things. But then it's what the school board would make those choices. And And the goal was to make those choices with law enforcement, because it has to be a partnership. What else?
We saw in recent years that especially after the pandemic, weapons in schools have, risen significantly. How will this type of program deter that, slow that down, reverse that trend?
I think, I mean, my experience is, and the sheriff can talk about this probably better than I can, but if you have a law enforcement presence there and people know that it's going to be enforced, and if there are schools enforce their rules, then you'll see less of that. Look, unfortunately, there's people that are going to do the wrong thing. Some people are going to do the wrong thing without evil intent. But if you have the right leadership at the teacher level, at the principal level, at the school board, and at the sheriff, and all law enforcement level, then we reduce the chance that something bad happens.
The only thing I would add to that is, the presence of law enforcement certainly has some deterrent effect, but I'll tell you, training both tactically and then interrelationship-wise, which is where we started 40 years ago in this community, they build relationships with each one of our young people in our school system. And it was done to have a positive relationship so that if they need help with a problem, if they observe a behavior or a comment, that they're comfortable in letting law enforcement know about it, but we need to be able to put that all together.
If you look at one of the primary reasons I think we have a lower crime rate than the rest of the country is because our law enforcement, our sheriffs, and our police chiefs have actually done exactly what the sheriff did. Years ago they started building these relationships, and you can see it with everything that happens in your community. If you've built a relationship, then people don't have an they don't think badly of you, and they trust you, and that's what's happening all across our state.
One last question. Will we see more public events like this from you in the future, and is this your soft launch to a run for president?
No. You'll see more things I'm doing, but it's not, I don't have a plan to run for president. So, but it's just, when I was governor, I was able to travel the state almost every day. In this job, you have to be in DC. Like as soon as I finish this, I go to DC. So, the way the schedule works, we're in DC generally 40 weeks a year. This year, a little bit less. So I'm there Mondays through at least Thursday. So the only time I have a chance to do a public event is on the weekends or something like this.
Thanks, everyone.
See you guys. Bye-bye. Thanks.
Thank you.
See more? Thank you. Aaron, could you have me the challenge?